What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We're on episode 149. And Justin, I don't know if you did the math in your head recently or today, but we are creeping in on 3-year anniversary territory here.
Whoa, I did not, but yeah, it makes sense. What would it be? That would be 156? It'll be 3 years, right?
Yep, 156. So we're about a month and a half away, steadily
Wow,
approaching, which is a really cool milestone. Got really good feedback
absolutely.
on last week's episode with Shannon.
Yeah, it's that was an awesome episode. Um, Great interview with Shannon. Her story's remarkable. I think the next chapter of her story will be even better.
Yes, I agree. It's kind of fascinating to me when people show the ability to be transparent, especially in times of vulnerability, because I think that's like, we've talked before about the importance of leadership and some of the qualities and characteristics of good leaders. And, I was thinking about this last night, actually, as I was going to sleep, thinking about this morning's episode. And that was one of the things that crossed my mind is how vulnerability or the ability to, um, show transparency, especially in times of struggle, is really, really important for quality leadership, I think, which it's ironically, people think the opposite a lot. Like leaders should be tough, never show weakness, that sort of thing. But I think that someone's who's able to show that they're down is pretty admirable. And I think that it's kind of like galvanizing for the troops, so to speak. So like if you have a leader that's willing to put themselves out there and show like, hey, I'm not perfect, these are the things I struggle in, I'm down right now, I think that it can be pretty motivating to everybody that follows for sure.
It shows relatability.
Yes.
And nobody. I mean, I guess I shouldn't speak for everybody, but nobody likes a leader that's bulletproof
Yeah, you're
and
right.
perfect.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that like for me personally, because I'm guilty of saying that, oh, I'm transparent, but like I do that when things are good. Like
right.
transparency would be like showing people your personal life or showing them what you do on the day to day. But then there's also that unique aspect of it that needs to be when everyone when the
When the
chips
chips
are
are
down.
down.
Yes, yes, for sure. Like where things are starting to not go well, and that's where you need to like be fully transparent. Like the one example that we've talked about before, and I think is pretty common in the fitness industry, is like posting progress pictures. Like people will post progress pictures when they're obviously making progress and then label it kind of like as a misnomer, like, oh, this is me being transparent. I'm being very open because look at how my physique looks. I'm showing everybody what I look like. But now, granted, that is transparency, but I think that to make it a little bit more genuine and authentic would be to do it when you're not making progress. Do it after you go on vacation and then you come home and you get sick and then you have some financial issues that you need to sort through or whatever it is. So you're out of the gym for 2, 3 months at a time. Then post the progress pictures, show the reality of the
Right.
situation. So I think that it was really, really obviously it's not something good or beneficial in any way that Shannon's going through the things that she's going through. But I was just very grateful and thankful that she was able to open up not only to us, but to everybody and all the listeners about some of the struggles, because I think that it was, if nothing else, she said how she wants to just help one person, right? And for me, like it helped me because I felt like if she can be open about almost dying and her heart attack, and this all stemmed from things that were seemingly in her control because of her image issues that have resulted in some mental illness struggles with her eating disorders and stuff. Like, if she could be open about that, then what in my life can I not be open about? Right.
Right. Absolutely.
So it was kind of like a very, very good episode. And it's really the point of every time you and I talk is to have something that we take away. And I feel like I do that even with just you and I, even like with basic dialogue, because the premise of the podcast is to be helpful to people. And I feel like it's helpful to me. So that's why I know I've said this before, but that's one of the reasons why I always feel like I have my best days on Saturdays, the mornings that we record, because sometimes we record earlier, but it's really nice when we do it early Saturday morning before the gym, because it resonates with me throughout the course of the day. And it really, I know it sounds corny, but it really gets my mind right to start the day. And I see like the way I start my day is essentially the way I finish my day. I don't know if that's just like a me thing or an everybody thing, but whatever I do to start my day, that kind of, man, I don't want to use your word, your least favorite word, the motivation thing. I don't know if it's like motivating to me, but like it's here's an example. If I
It
start the
sets the
day,
tone.
yeah, absolutely, like mentally, physically, emotionally. If I set the tone, to use your term, if I set the tone and I'm rushed in the morning, like I'm running around, running behind super late, like everything's scattered, it's almost like I don't have the mental stability, for lack of a better term, to break out of that. Like I'm stuck in that frantic, really, really anxiety ridden mentality for the entirety of the day then. And if I start off eating a great meal and it's really healthy and I'm sticking to my nutrition plan, it's very easy for me to stick to it the rest of the day. Versus if I have junk food in the morning just because I was really craving it, then I kind of, like we talk about all the time, that self-sabotaging mindset where it's like, oh, I screwed up this morning, so I'm just going to eat a bad lunch or whatever. So for me to start Saturday mornings or whatever morning, if we do it with this podcast, is highly beneficial, especially when we're able to talk to guests, which is the plan for the rest of the year, is having some more people on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we could even
um,
open it up to the public, yeah, again, because we do this from time to time and we've gotten some good responses of people that they would like to see on the podcast.
yeah, because ultimately, I mean, it matters who we want to interview, but it really matters who they want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing it for
So,
them, right? This isn't,
right.
obviously we are adamant about the fact that you and I have tons of benefit from all the people that we interview, but it's really for them. That's the sole purpose, is to try to allow people to have a platform to hear from other people who are successful, because not every day do you get to confront, or not confront, but converse with people that are as successful or as impactful as some of the people that we've had on our podcast. Although I will paradoxically say that the opposite is true, where I feel like there's a lot of miraculous people that we can learn from in our everyday life. You just have to be willing and open to listen, because I don't think that many people are willing to listen in today's world. And you could be missing a lot of valuable insights from people around you that you don't even realize could be super impactful for your day-to-day life.
I couldn't agree with that more. There's so many people in your day to day that if people, like, societally speaking, would just open up and try to have a real conversation with an absolute stranger, they would gain so much value from that, just because there's so many people that have been through so many hard things and are like what's the word I'm looking for, are hyper successful in their own right,
Yeah.
from where they came from to where they are today. You may look at somebody that's a manager at McDonald's, and the average person would say, oh, they're a manager at McDonald's, whoop-de-doo. What they do is stay there the longest. But if you actually talk to that manager at McDonald's, they could have been clear down in the dumps 6 months ago, and you would never know.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think
if
that
you
the
if
analogy
we
I would use is like when you talked about, because you were very open about this before, about when you were in like the peak phases of your weight loss stage. And there were times that as you were approaching your all-time low mark, which was like a continuous progression because it was new lows almost literally every day, you would always say, yes, I've lost all this weight, but I'm still the biggest guy in the room. So there may be some people that would look at that and say, oh, that guy's overweight, so I'm not going to take advice from him on fat loss. But one of the things that we've talked about is, yeah, okay, I may be X amount of weight, but I've lost 200 and some pounds over the past year. So obviously, no,
right,
I know a little something. And you could look at someone who has, I don't know, $10,000 in the bank account. And maybe your mentality is, well, I need to talk to someone who has $1 million in the bank account. But maybe the relatability factor of the person who has 10 grand, like you said, maybe that person had filed for bankruptcy a couple months ago and is slowly and systematically digging their way out of a hole and their situation is a little bit more applicable to what you're looking for, a little bit more relatable to what you're experiencing right now. So maybe that person can give you a little bit more insight than the somebody who's super successful. Because I'll be honest, a lot of times when I've networked with people who are extremely, extremely successful, while I appreciate their time and it's valuable and I do get insight, sometimes it's not as impactful because a lot of their situation doesn't mimic mine. Not that I'm going to discredit anybody, but you know what I'm saying? Like the
Yeah.
proverbial silver spoon type deal. Like that may
Right.
not help me at all.
No, I mean, if I'm ever going to gain wealth, like true wealth, it's going to be blue collar.
Yes.
It's going to be in the trenches. It's not going to be inherited.
I always think
So
it's fascinating listening to stories of people like that, like people who have. I know that this is kind of the cliche here, but the people that have come from nothing and like are multimillionaires, because I always wonder what the thought process, what the mentality is, and if it ever changes. Like someone who's starting from zero, you obviously have to have like a cutthroat mentality or a killer mentality to be able to pursue what you're looking for. And there's obviously times of downslide or periods where you're not making the progress that you want to make, and it could be very frustrating and inevitably lead to people quitting. But you wonder, like, is there ever break pressure? Is there ever complacency? Does the person always maintain that sense of resiliency, or do they let up a little bit? You just always wonder what it's like for someone who starts from zero and gets to the top. And a lot of times I also think that that type of underdog story is so valuable and so just like welcoming or welcomed by everyone, that I think some people also overplay the underdog card too. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean by that? Like they say like, oh,
like they want to be Rudy.
yes, yes, for sure. And I think
Yeah.
that sometimes you can even create that in your own head. Like,
Yeah, you are the underdog when really you're not.
and I don't think there's it's kind of twofold. Like I feel like there's benefit to that. One of the things I think about was, I don't know if I've asked you this before. Have you ever seen The Last Dance?
The Last Stance.
Last Dance, like the Michael Jordan documentary.
I've watched parts of it, but no, I haven't seen the whole thing.
So one of the underlying stories behind it, and it is so good. So, and I think I've mentioned this before on episodes eons ago, but if anybody has not seen it, The Last Dance, I highly, highly recommend you go see those episodes. I think there's like, I don't know how many there are. I want to say maybe nine, possibly. I could be wrong, but they are absolutely unbelievable, and I highly recommend them even for non-basketball fans. If you can like listen to me and say, "Oh, well, I'm not a fan of basketball and I don't care about Michael Jordan," the lessons that it teaches, like regarding his mentality and stuff, are just beyond fascinating. But anyway, one of the underlying stories with it is how Michael had this unique ability to turn everything against himself. Like there's that meme going around where it's him sitting in the chair being interviewed, and the caption has like the ellipses, like the dot dot dot, and I took that personally because there were so many instances where he had like brief interactions with people, and then he explained that he took that to heart, and he would like create this story in his head about being disrespected by this person. Like there was one story about, I think it was George Carl, who was a rival coach or coach for a rival team at the time, and he saw him at dinner or something before a playoff game, and Coach Carl didn't say hi to him, and he took that personally and took it to heart, like he was being super super disrespected, and then just turned it into this absolute monster inside of himself, and then he took that out on the other team. And they said that Michael was notorious for that, for like almost creating like false scenarios in a sense, because he was so like overbearing with it, that he would just create this superior underdog mentality where it's like me versus the entire world and I have to destroy everything in my path, which was like really, really cool for me to hear. But counter to that, I think that that can also be a bad thing if you take the underdog mentality, because there's that very fine threshold of victim mentality, which I'm sure that you see all the time with people, as do I.
Oh boy. Yeah, I think it's okay to want to be the underdog and place yourself in a scenario to be an underdog, but don't cry wolf.
Yes.
Because everybody's heard the story of the boy who cried wolf. You can only play the victim when you're not the victim for so long. But the underdog, you're the author of your story. So you ultimately get to pick where your high is because you just don't stop shooting for greatness until you get to your high,
Hmm.
right? So essentially, as long as you are always reaching to be better, you are the underdog.
Yep. That's one of the things that I like think about too is I try to be, man, it's hard, dude, but I try to be so brutally honest with myself at all times. So when it comes to the victim mentality, which we're all guilty of at some point, feeling like we got screwed over, like the boss didn't give me the promotion that I deserve, or I didn't get the place that I deserved in my bodybuilding show, or whatever it is. You always feel like you got to like stick it to the man because you got wronged, or there's some type of injustice that goes on. But more often than not, I pride myself in being able to think very objectively and third party about situations. So I can remove me from myself, if that makes sense. Like I can take away my emotional attachment to certain things in my life and see in the mirror and say, what is your objective situation right now? So when you talk about the underdog story, like I grew up in a middle to upper middle class family in the suburbs. I went to a good school. I got a good education. My parents both worked full time, so we never had any like financial hardships. I always had everything that I needed. So that right there in and of itself is already an enormous, a massive head start for me ahead of everybody else. So like, yeah, I wasn't rich necessarily by some standards. I certainly wasn't a millionaire, but I'm not the type of person who could get to millionaire status someday and then look back and say, I was the underdog. I wasn't born into money. It's like, yeah, but you may be not born into money in terms of millionaire status, but you were certainly born into comfort, which gave you a lot of resources and a lot of opportunity to be successful. So, like, I look at my life from a young age and think, I didn't really have too many hardships from a socioeconomic side of things. So was my upbringing really, really that difficult, right?
Right.
So I mean, that's just the way that I think about it. I mean, I don't know if you have similar thoughts about your upbringing. Like obviously being able to see areas of your life that could improve or could have been, easier to improve on in terms of setting you up for success. But just when I look at the big picture of my resources that I had to other people's resources that they had, it would really be a shame if I wasn't successful because I would have wasted a lot of those opportunities, I think.
Yeah, I think I mean, I understand what you're saying. For me, kind of a lot of the same. I grew up and, wasn't, by no means wealthy. We were middle class at best. But my parents did everything in their ability to always give the opportunity to do whatever it was that I wanted to do
Hmm.
and encouraged to try new things. And then, like, if I tried a new sport, I remember this, like, in particular, like, if I ever wanted to try a new sport, the rule was you had to see it through. You
Yep.
don't have to make it a career. You don't have to make it your childhood thing that you did every year. But once you start, you got to finish. So the whole season, whatever it is, that's what you're gonna do.
Hmm. I was the same
Even
for
if you
me.
hate it.
Yep.
So if I wanted to play basketball, I was gonna play basketball, which is why I didn't play basketball. But yeah. So I think that is a good perspective, is to think about because a lot of times we think we're the underdog,
Hmm.
like we were just talking about, but are we really? You know, I sometimes I think I was the underdog because I didn't go to college, and now I'm in a field where education is a big thing. You know, but I don't think that is an underdog story for me even now. If we're actually thinking about it, because I got the real world experience, I got the boots on the ground experience to do it. So, do you really need the education? So, is that an underdog story? I guess it's a you got to have a perspective on it.
Yeah, and there's always different perspective and context because when you said I didn't go to college, there's also the large demographic of people that can't go to college. So like don't have the
Oh,
financial resources or even someone to co-sign for a loan in order to go to college. Like obviously there are post-secondary opportunities, but not everybody can go to every college that they want. That's obviously a
you can't
false.
go to the college that they want, but that is the nice thing about this, about the society we live in is, furthering your education as long as you are putting forth the effort.
Mhm.
You have to go with that is definitely an option for everybody.
Which is
You just
actually
have to.
that's dude, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that
No,
is
you're good.
I we need to focus on that because as we were
Yeah.
going through this conversation, I'm actually glad you brought that up because as we were going through this conversation, my mind kind of like I don't want to say it wanders, but like as you're talking, it brings up different talking points in my head. Like, ooh, that's a good point. I want to talk about this. So when you bring up hard work and education, those two are like trigger words. So this is going to kind of like elicit a little bit of like diarrhea of the mouth, so to speak, because I have a lot of thoughts. Actually, not a lot of thoughts. That's the problem. I have a lot of questions or a particular question that I don't have a lot of thoughts on because I see both sides, so I'm not really convicted. So I want to ask you a question about hard work and education. Um, Kind of give some metaphors and some references because I don't have a definitive answer, and I don't like when I don't have definitive answers to things.
Right.
So I want to go to commercial break. And when we come back, I want to be able to ask you a particular question about that just to get your insight because it's something that I've gone back and forth on for a while.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds
So let's
good.
go to a quick commercial break and I'll ask you that question when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram and order your delicious baked goods today because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we're back from our commercial break. All right, Justin, prior to the break, we're kind of reviewing last week's episode, and that kind of engendered a discussion about vulnerability and leadership, and eventually led us to talking about hard work. Go figure. So, one of the questions that popped in my head, and this is something that I've gone back and forth on, and I think we've kind of touched on it briefly in the past on the podcast. One of the things I wanted to talk about was hard work and success and the relationship between the two. So when you talk, I was raised in a household where hard work, where I was taught that hard work overcomes everything. And I believe that your situation at home was very similar, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you kind of got the same propaganda, so to speak, that hard work will get you out of all situations. And I believe that. And as I got older, and when I got into education, I was privy to a lot more context. So growing up in the area that I grew up in, and growing up around the kids that I grew up around, I was just always under the assumption that everybody had equal opportunity because the people that I was around had equal opportunity, right?
Right.
Well, as I get older now, I see a lot more context. I see a lot more different backgrounds. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids to this point, and even training, I see a gamut of people from all different states. So I have a really big sample size that I can pull from now. And I wanted to ask you, with kids in the school system, just because that's kind of the area that I'm thinking about. Are they able to work themselves out of bad home life situations? Like, can anybody have long-term financial and professional success in America? And the reason, like the metaphor that I would give would be like a football player. We'll just use that since it's football season, and I'm sure you're probably going to watch a lot of college football today. If
Oh
you're
yeah.
if you're a college football or a football player and you want to play at, your favorite team, Justin, you want to play at Ohio State. Can
Yes.
anybody do that? Is that something that anybody has the ability to do given they put in the amount of time and work that it requires? Or is there largely a genetic component that comes or that is necessary, that is like a prerequisite to play at that elite of a level? Like, obviously, both would be ideal, but can anybody have the ability to be an Ohio State Buckeye if you just, quote, put in the work? So that's kind of the analogy that I think about when I talk about these kids in school. So, what are your thoughts on kids and their ability to use education as a platform to, quote, to get out of a bad situation? Are all kids able to do that, do you think?
So yes, I was hoping you asked that. I was hoping that's where you went with that question. So,
Oh,
um, yeah, I think so. I think the blanket answer, yes, hard work is going to pay off. Hard work is going to get you out. Let me rephrase that. Hard work steered by the right teachers and the right mentors will get you pointed on the right track. And then you have to have momentum. You have
uh,
to ride that momentum of you worked so hard you can't stop.
yep.
But I think it's easier for kids that, so I think some kids are not gifted, right?
Mhm.
I was not gifted when it came to academia. Like I'm not the brightest bulb in the pack at all times, right? So but I had an amazing support structure at home. So I did okay. If I would have worked harder, I probably would have excelled because I had people pushing me and wanting me to do better. But some kids, as you've talked about before, and like you just said and you alluded to, have horrible home lives.
Yep.
They have no support other than you and the other teachers around you, their army at school. So yes, I think you can. I think hard work is going to get you out of that situation, but I don't know that hard work as a standalone will rise you to the level of success that you could potentially be without good mentors and good somebody to look up to too.
Okay.
When you're fundamentally at a young age, you have to have somebody to look up to and say, I want to be like that, or I
Mhm.
want to be better than that.
So you think it's sufficient to say then that hard work alone is not enough, especially in the absence of the support system?
I, I no, I mean yes and no. I don't. So that's a hard answer because yeah, I think hard work is definitely going to propel you forward enough to get you out of the bad situation, but it's not always going to be enough to get you to your potential.
Okay. So hard work can get you in a better position, but it can't get you necessarily in an equal position of everybody else.
Right.
So like,
Because I
okay,
mean,
here's the analogy. Tell me if this makes sense. And I'm just, you know, that obviously, and our listeners know that I put everything into like metaphors and analogies for comparison's sake to try to make things make sense. You and I have a group of people, and we're all kids, and we all have different vehicles. I may have a Lamborghini, which is going to cause me to move further and a lot faster than most people. And you might have a pedal bike. So you can still distance yourself from your starting point, but your ability on how far you can distance yourself from your starting point is limited. Would that be a fair comparison?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I
So
particular thoughts on it, but continue. I just wanted to get your insights. Continue.
I think it's there's different like sides of the picture too, because like some Ivy League students, if you fast forward to college, some Ivy League kids or young adults that are on the dean's list completely turn out to be duds. They worked really hard because obviously they got into an Ivy League college, so they had to have the grades. So they worked hard. They got there and they kept the grades. So they're working hard throughout college,
Mm-hmm.
but they turn out to be subpar leaders or, oh, somewhat successful in their career. And then you take some community college, young adults who have worked 3 jobs and really worked their way through college, and they turn out to be millionaires
Yeah.
because they were relentless in their effort.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think sometimes it's mentality, sometimes it's that Rudy thing, that Rudy situation where the deck was stacked against you and you had the perseverance. But I think that that person, that group of people, the community college success stories in the back on the back burner had family outside of their bloodline that really cared about them and really propelled them forward. So teachers or one of their early bosses at work that took a liking to them and mentored them and pulled them in, instead of how you and I had the nurturing and loving care from our parents and our family when we were young and all the way through. Some people don't get that until they get to high school. Some people don't get that until they get to college or their first job. And then they find that, that older person that's a mentor that teaches them and helps them grow into who they are. I guess the moral of my story is don't overlook your mentors, because you
Mm-hmm.
don't know who they are until years after they become your mentor.
This is a whole topic that we could bring up and discuss for hours on end, and to quickly hammer it home on my side of things. There certainly is an uneven playing field in today's world. And you can point to different things like socioeconomic status, geographical issues. I know that one of the big things is like racial disparities or gender disparities or whatever. But I definitely see, at least in my school district, which is very consistent in terms of socioeconomics, it's very consistent in terms of ethnicity. Um, so like the people in the school building are pretty similar in the grand scheme of things, and I even see some inconsistencies there. So it just makes you wonder, especially seeing some of the homes and the lives of the kids that I have, and the the turmoil and
Mhm.
the just complete chaos that they have in their home life, and their lack of a support system anywhere other than school is kind of astonishing. And you wonder then, like when you talk about the importance of having family that isn't your blood family and having these mentors, do kids all have the exposure to mentors like that? Like, yeah, you would think that teachers could provide that, but not everybody's going to go to a school with a teacher that they're able to connect with, or that will even take the time to try to connect with them. So I just don't know if it's always an even playing field. And it's something that I've considered for a long time. And my 2 cents on hard work is, and I've said this before and I continue to say this to people in the day to day, is you won't get anywhere with hard work more than likely. There obviously are certainly outliers, but the your normal person like you and I, your everyman, is not going to get anywhere without hard work. But
Right.
hard work doesn't guarantee success, but the lack of hard work definitely guarantees failure. So sometimes people are disillusioned by thinking that there is a direct correlation between hard work and success. So exactly what I put into it is exactly what I get out of it. And sometimes that's not the case. Like over my years of playing sports and coaching sports, I've played with some and coached some. Most recently coaching, obviously, more so than playing, but I've coached some athletes that are the hardest workers on the team, and sometimes they're just not any good. There's just like genetic
Yes,
variables at play there,
some
and
people
it's go
are
ahead.
not athletic.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And it's,
some
yeah,
people are
it's
not
normal.
athletic, but them hard workers, if they can continue that work ethic and continue that drive and refocus it into education or into their professional careers when they graduate high school, because they don't have to go to college. You don't have to go to college to be successful. That's not,
Absolutely not.
and I'm an advocate for college. I'm an advocate for picking something that makes sense for you and furthering your education. But I didn't do that.
You know what's very
I
ironic,
think
Justin, is you did
yeah.
not go to college, and you are a huge advocate of people striving for that in most instances. I
Yeah.
went to college, and ironically enough, I more often than not actually tell people not to go in a lot of circumstances. Now, it's not black and white. I'm not saying I tell people to not
Yeah,
go
neither
or
am
I
I.
tell
Yeah.
people to go. And I know that you and I both have like instances where we say yes, instances where we say no. But it seems like I just think it's very, very cool how our different experiences, we also have different, not, I don't want to say different views on higher education because we're both in favor of it if it makes sense for you. But like, I just like the perspective change between you and I.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
the
see it.
irony again, there's more layers of irony is the fact that I went to college and consider myself to be moderately successful. You did not go to college and you are successful. So you would think that the path that we walked would be the path that we recommend for others, but it seems like the opposite in a lot of instances.
I just think people need to understand that if you don't go to college and you want a high level of success, you are going to have the harder road.
Yes. Most times, yes. I think I know that there's outliers and there's people
I'd
that
say it's
argue
like
that, but
80%.
how
I'd
much?
give it like an 80, like an 80-20. You
Yeah.
know, 80% of the time, if you don't go to college, but you're striving for a high level of success, it is going to be a harder path. I think it'll be more rewarding, though. There's the caveat.
Yes.
If you go to college and you put that have that ferocious intensity in your drive for success, and you apply that to school and work while you're in college, even if you don't have to, you're gaining that real world experience at the same time of seeking higher education in the right direction. It'll be easier to propel yourself to success with more knowledge and better prepared for professional growth
Mhm.
because of what you gained from college is where my mind that's where my mind goes. So if that's your goal is success, being hyper successful, you need the same work ethic, but it's still going to be easier if you just go through school, go through the college route. It will
Yeah.
definitely be easier. So maybe some people, I mean, some people don't crave the easier though. Some people want that gritty, hard path, which
Yeah.
I admire because I mean that's the way I went, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I
Mhm.
wouldn't go back and go to college, but I do think I would rather my daughter go to college with a plan and execute the plan and understand that there's going to be variables, there's going to be audibles, there's going to be a change in focus. There's the road, the map is going to change. Your plan is going to change, but always be striving to succeed in your plan.
I agree with that. I think that's insightful. And so I guess then going forward, the actionable steps for this week that I can kind of create in my own head would be I don't know if you consider this actionable because it's not really like creating an outward product or an action other than something that's, in your head, something that's internal. But I would recommend that this week, maybe something that people can take away is in your brain, kind of sit back and really think about the opportunities that you've been provided and whether or not you've capitalized on those opportunities. So think about your upbringing, think about your family structure, think about your school that you went to, think about your support system, your friend groups, the sports that you've played, the extracurriculars that you did, your hobbies growing up. Think about all those past experiences that help shape you And did you capitalize on all the resources? Did you take mentors up on their advice? When people offered to help you, did you take them up on that? Look at where you were growing up and look at where you're at now. And did you use those as platforms to success? Like, did you climb up those stairs that were being provided? I think of them as like Lego blocks. Like every successful person or mentor or um, every benefit that you had growing up is like a Lego block, and you stack them into stairs. Did you use all of them to stack them into stairs, or did you build a cage and cage yourself in? Like, what was your path based on the opportunities that you had? So I think that everybody could sit back and think about that and give you a little bit more insight into how you've been. And then if you feel like you need to change the narrative a little bit, then maybe go ahead and do that. So that's kind of my actionable steps for this episode.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. If you have instead of built a stairway, you created a cage, like you said, use your hard work ethic to break down the walls of the cage and start using the mentors that are at your disposal.
I like
and for success.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. This has been episode 149. As always, we appreciate your listenership and we look forward to hearing back from you guys next week. Unbreakable, unstoppable, I'm pushed to the